When the Duke laughed and said, "Let her try," she was standing 6 feet away. "Lady Imogen Ferris needs one road through his land to save everything her family has left. Lawrence Trevelyan has more land than he can ride in a day, more money than he can spend in a lifetime, and finds the whole business quietly amusing. She shows up at his door the next morning with a leather satchel, a legal proposal, and absolutely no intention of asking for charity. By November, nobody is laughing. The Honourable Mrs. Partridge held her autumn dinner on the 14th of October, as she had held it every year since her husband died, and left her the house, the income, and the freedom to invite whomever she liked, without consulting anyone. She liked this year to invite 23 people. She seated them badly on purpose. She had theories about proximity, and she served a Rhenish wine that nobody requested, and everyone drank. Imogen Ferris arrived at 6:30, with mud on her second-best boots and her first-best composure. She had come directly from the south field, where the drainage ditch had given up entirely, and taken 12 yards of fencing with it. The boots were a loss. The composure had cost more. She handed her coat to the footman, accepted a glass of the Rhenish she had not asked for, and went to find someone worth talking to. The room was the usual room. The Misses Albright near the fire, debating something in urgent whispers. Colonel Haverstock by the window, describing a battle he had not quite been present at, to a man who had not quite asked. Lady Frome on the settee, wearing an expression of permanent sufferance that Imogen had always privately admired for its efficiency. And there, near the far end of the room, standing with the ease of a man who had nowhere better to be and knew it, was Lawrence Trevelyan, Duke of Trevelyan. He was talking to Mr. Aldous Crane, who farmed 300 acres to the west of Trevelyan Park, and who had the particular quality of laughing at everything a duke said, regardless of whether it was funny. Lawrence was not, at this moment, saying anything amusing. He was listening, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding his glass at an angle that suggested he might set it down if something more interesting came along. Imogen had met him 4 times. At the Albright midsummer party in June, where he had been introduced and promptly forgotten her name. At the Haverstock shoot in August, where he had not spoken to her at all. At church in September, where she had sat 3 rows behind him, and observed that he gave very little attention to the sermon, which she could not entirely fault. And at the vicar's tea, where he had asked her how she found the autumn, and she had said she found it wet, and he had smiled as if she had said something charming, which she had found mildly irritating. She did not dislike him. She had not thought enough about him to dislike him. She crossed to Mrs. Albright the elder, who was kind and asked sensible questions, and they spoke for 20 minutes about the drainage problem, and the knot between Imogen's shoulders began, incrementally, to loosen. It was Mr. Crane who did it. He had moved from Lawrence's side and collected 2 more men, Mr. Forsyth, who leased land from the Trevelyan estate, and a younger man Imogen did not recognize, and they had arranged themselves near the center of the room with the gravitational confidence of men who expected to be heard. Lawrence had drifted after them, and the small congress had formed the way these things always did, naturally, inevitably, with the Duke at its center, whether he had intended it or not. "The Ferris Road," Mr. Crane was saying. Imogen's attention sharpened. She did not move. "I had it from Forsyth that the Earl means to put forward a formal proposal, easement rights, through Trevelyan land." Crane's voice carried the register of a man sharing news he found faintly absurd. "The daughter will handle the negotiations, apparently, on his behalf." "The South Lane," the younger man said. "The only lane worth having. The north track floods to the axle before Christmas. The South Lane through Trevelyan is the only road that gets the harvest to the Dunstable market before February." Crane swirled his glass. "Bold move." "Surely Ferris himself," the younger man began. "Has other preoccupations," said Mr. Forsyth, with the diplomatic pause of someone selecting his words carefully. This was accurate. The Earl of Ferris had, for the past 2 years, preoccupied himself with a history of the Peloponnesian Wars that showed no signs of completion, and every sign of being an excellent reason to remain in his study. He signed what was put before him. He trusted Imogen to put before him only what needed signing. This arrangement had not been discussed between them and did not need to be. "Well," said Crane, "the daughter will manage it, I expect. She runs the whole thing already." He said it with the affectionate condescension of a man who meant it as a compliment. "She's capable enough. I just wonder if Trevelyan will take it seriously." All 3 men turned to the Duke. Lawrence raised his eyes slowly. taking in the expectant faces with the mild patience of a man accustomed to being the room's answer. "Let her try," he said and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. That almost made it worse. It was the laugh of a man for whom the word try described an effort he had never personally been required to make. Fond, dismissive, the two not incompatible in his experience. Crane laughed. Forsyth smiled. The younger man looked relieved. Imogen set her glass down on the side table to her left. She did it without looking, without a sound. Mrs. Albright glanced at her. Imogen met her eyes and smiled, a real smile or close enough, and said, "Will you excuse me?" and moved across the room. Not toward Lawrence, toward Lady Frome, who received her arrival with mild surprise. They spoke for 8 minutes. Lady Frome's youngest daughter had married a man in Shropshire. Imogen asked after them. Lady Frome's opinion of Shropshire was extensive. Imogen listened with every appearance of interest and the whole of her attention on the steadiness of her own hands. At 7:15, she said her goodbyes to Mrs. Partridge, thanked her for the wine and collected her coat. She did not look at Lawrence Trevelyan on her way out. He looked at her. She did not know this. She had already gone. Her father was in the library when she arrived home. This was unusual. He was generally in the study, the library being a room he associated with other people's presence, and she found him standing at the shelves with the abstracted air of a man who had come looking for one book and been detained by the presence of several others. "Imogen," he said without turning, "good dinner?" "Adequate." She set down her gloves. "Papa, I need to discuss the Trevelyan Road with you." He extracted a volume. "The South Lane business." "Yes, I want to write to Trevelyan tomorrow. A formal request for a meeting, an easement negotiation, under your name with a note that I'll conduct the discussion on your behalf." He turned then, with the look he wore when something had penetrated the Peloponnesian Wars. It was a mild look. Her father was a mild man, well-intentioned, genuinely fond of her, and constitutionally unsuited to the management of anything requiring sustained attention. "You think he'll agree to that?" he said. "Take a meeting with you rather than with me." "He'll agree because the alternative is managing the correspondence himself." She picked up her gloves again. "I'll draft the letter. You sign it." He looked at her for a moment, with the expression she had seen since she was 16, part admiration, part something that might have been guilt, if he'd been the sort of man who sat with guilt long enough to name it. "Right," he said. "Yes, you draft it." She was at the door when he said, "Imogen." She turned. "To be careful with Trevelyan," he said. He paused. "He's not a bad man from what I know, but he's not accustomed to being negotiated with." "No," she said. "I imagine he isn't." She went upstairs and drafted the letter. It arrived at Trevelyan Park at 9 o'clock the following morning, carried by a Ferris boy who'd been told to wait for a response. Lawrence was in the breakfast room. He read it over his coffee. "Your Grace, I write to request a meeting at your earliest convenience regarding road access across the southern portion of the Trevelyan estate, specifically the lane known locally as Wren's Cut, which connects the Ferris estate to the Dunstable Road. My daughter, Lady Imogen Ferris, will conduct all discussions on my behalf and is fully authorized to negotiate the terms of a formal easement agreement. She is available any morning this week or next, at whatever hour suits your schedule. I remain, Your Grace, your obedient servant, Ferris." He read it twice. It was the most precisely worded letter he had received in recent memory, and he received a great deal of correspondence. There was no flattery, no social scaffolding. Just the matter, stated cleanly, and at its center, a 24-year-old woman authorized by her father to conduct a legal negotiation that her father evidently had no intention of conducting himself. He had been at Mrs. Partridge's dinner last night. He had said something. He was trying to recall exactly what. Let her try. He turned the letter over, set it down, picked up his coffee, set that down too. The butler appeared in the doorway. "Tell the boy," Lawrence said, "that Thursday morning is convenient, 10 o'clock. She arrived at 3 minutes to 10. He had expected something more tentative, the manner of someone entering a room they were uncertain of. What arrived instead was Lady Imogen Ferris, in a dark blue riding habit, with a leather satchel over one shoulder, who shook his hand with the directness of a solicitor and accepted the chair he indicated without checking whether it was the better one. The drawing-room had been arranged for the meeting, a table, 2 chairs, the footman stationed near the door with the door itself left open, which was correct and which neither of them remarked upon. She was not what he had been seeing at dinner parties. The drawing-room version of her was composed. This version was also composed, but differently, less arranged, more actual. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Your Grace," she said. "I'll come directly to the point." "Please," he said. She opened the satchel and produced a document, several pages closely written, with a hand-drawn map attached. She set it on the table between them. Wren's Cut is the only viable route from the Ferris estate to the Dunstable market between October and March. The north track is impassable in wet weather, and the eastern loop adds 4 hours and crosses the Albright Ford, which has been unreliable since July. She touched the map briefly. "I am proposing a formal easement, a right-of-way in perpetuity for agricultural use on defined terms. I have drafted the outline here." She slid the document toward him. He looked at it without touching it. "In perpetuity," he said. "Yes." "That's a long time." "The estate will be here a long time. I would rather negotiate this once than return to renegotiate every time the title changes hands." He looked at her. She looked back. Her eyes were a particular shade of brown, watchful, the eyes of someone who had learned to read a room before entering it. "What terms?" he said. She told him. They were reasonable, fairer than he had expected. No unrestricted access, no maintenance demands, no cost absorbed by his side. She had thought it through to every edge. He listened to all of it without interrupting, which surprised her. He saw it surprise her. "I'll have my solicitor review it," he said. "Of course. It may take a week or two." "I understand." She began to gather the papers. He watched the precise, economical way she stacked them, returned them to the satchel, fastened the buckle. "Lady Imogen," he said. She looked up. "I should tell you, I heard last night that you intended to put this proposal forward." He paused. "I want you to know I intend to consider it seriously." Something moved across her face, not gratitude, not quite anger, something between them that was gone before he could name it. "I had assumed nothing less, Your Grace," she said. She stood, shook his hand, and left. He sat at the table for a moment. Then he pulled the copy she had left toward him and read it from the beginning. It was an exceptionally well-drafted document. He thought about the look on her face when he had said he would take it seriously. He picked up his coffee, found it cold, and rang for more. The first formal meeting took place on a Thursday, the second the following Tuesday. By the third, Lawrence had stopped asking his secretary to confirm the appointment, and Imogen had stopped arriving with the punctuality of someone making a point. The meetings were supposed to last an hour. They lasted 2, then 2.5. Then, on one occasion in early November, until the light had gone and a footman appeared with candles, and both of them were momentarily surprised to find it dark. The footman's arrival had the secondary effect of recalling them to themselves. Imogen gathered her papers. Lawrence rose. They said good evening with perfect propriety, and she was handed to her horse at the door by the Trevelyan groom, who had been waiting with impressive patience in the yard. The ostensible reason for the meeting's length was the complexity of the terms. This was not entirely false. Road easements touched on drainage responsibility, surface maintenance, seasonal weight limits, the question of whether agricultural use extended to livestock transport. Imogen had an answer to every point and a counter-proposal for every answer. Lawrence had opinions he had not previously known he possessed about country lane subgrades. What he did not tell himself for several weeks was that he was finding reasons. She came on Thursdays. He had stopped scheduling anything else on Thursdays. She brought the satchel. Inside was the draft easement, now annotated by both of them in different hands, his in black, hers in dark red ink that she said was simply what she had to hand, and that he privately suspected she had chosen, so their notes could not be mistaken for each other. Inside the satchel was also sometimes the estate ledger, a large, worn volume, dark green, which she consulted quickly and closed quickly. He never asked about it, she never offered. "The maintenance clause," she said on a Thursday in mid-November. "We've discussed the maintenance clause." "We've discussed it, we haven't agreed. I offered to absorb the resurfacing cost, and I declined." He looked at her across the table. The first real rain of November was doing what November rain does to English countryside. "So you declined," he said, "because you do not want me paying for the road." "I declined because the document should not create a financial obligation on your side. If it does, it becomes a favor. I want a legal right, not a favor." "There's nothing wrong with—" "There is," she said quietly. "Everything wrong with it." He was quiet. The rain intensified and thought better of it. "Very well," he said. "Shared maintenance, proportional to use." She considered it, the slight tension at the corner of her mouth that meant she was working through the implications, the way her hand moved unconsciously toward the satchel when she was thinking. "Proportional how?" she said. "A baseline survey. Usage logged over the first 2 years, then a fixed ratio applied going forward." She looked at him with the expression of someone revising an impression. "That's acceptable," she said. "Good." She wrote it down. He watched her write it down. This was the problem. He watched her too much, watched her the way you watch someone doing something competently that you had not expected, the way you watch a difficult thing being done well. He watched her think. He watched her handle a disagreement without raising her voice and without yielding a point she had not actually conceded. He had stopped wondering what was in the ledger and started wondering what it cost her to carry it. He had said none of this to anyone. He was not sure what he would say. It was Petch who mentioned the suitor. Lawrence had ridden out on a Wednesday. There was nothing significant about Wednesdays, and slowed near the Ferris South Field, where a crew was repairing the fencing the October flood had taken. Petch was supervising. He was a small man of somewhere between 65 and 90, with the weathered compression of someone who had spent his life outdoors making good on what had been let go wrong inside. Lawrence stopped his horse. Petch squinted up at him with the mild wariness of a man who had learned to be careful around dukes without being capable of subservience. "Your Grace." "Petch," Lawrence looked at the fencing. "How's the South Field draining?" "Better than it was, not as well as it should." A pause. "Lady Imogen's put in a new cut along the east edge, her own design." "Is it working?" "It will do." The old man's tone managed to be simultaneously a criticism of the drainage and a defense of its designer. "She's in Dunstable today," Lawrence had not asked. "Mr. Davenport rode with her," Petch added with the perfect neutrality of a man supplying information he had not been asked for. "Second time this month." "Davenport? The Davenport at Harrow Farm?" "His father's Harrow Farm. He'll have it in a few years. Good land, well managed." A pause containing a great deal. "Solvent." Lawrence said nothing. "Calls regular," Petch said. "Polite sort of man." "I'm sure he is." Petch glanced up once with the kind of glance that on a younger man's face might have been called knowing. Then he returned to the fencing crew and said something pointed to the man on the left, and the conversation was over. Lawrence rode home at a pace that was not quite a canter and told himself nothing in particular. On Thursday she arrived with a satchel and a slight tension at her jaw that had not been there the week before. They worked through the seasonal wait clause. They argued with genuine feeling about whether agricultural use extended to livestock transport. "Obviously, yes," she said. "Requires specification," he said. "A cow is a cow, Your Grace," she said, which made him laugh, and her mouth did something that was not quite a smile but was not nothing. At 12:30 she accepted for the first time the offer of coffee. He did not make a production of it. He rang, coffee appeared. She wrapped both hands around the cup in the way of someone who has been cold longer than they have admitted. "You rode this morning?" he said. "From Dunstable. I left early." She drank the coffee. "The Dunstable factor wants a decision by the end of January, whether we're bringing the winter grain to him or to Cardwell. Which will you choose?" "Cardwell pays better. The Dunstable road is better." She turned her pen in her fingers. "Cardwell, probably, if the easement is in place." "If." She had said it without looking at him, which meant she was being honest rather than tactical. "It will be," he said. She looked up. That look again, not gratitude, not anger, something in the difficult country between the two. "You've said that before," she said, not accusatory, precise. "I mean it to be done before Christmas." She held his gaze for a moment, nodded, returned to the draft. He returned to his copy. Outside, the November rain did its work, and neither of them spoke for a while, which had become, without either deciding so, entirely comfortable. Her friend came on a Friday in late November, arriving in a hired chaise with a hat that had not survived the journey and opinions that had survived everything. Her name was Mrs. Clara Blythe, a widow of 2 years, 31, who had known Imogen since they were girls and exercised the prerogative of long friendship to say whatever she thought whenever she thought it. "You look thinner," she said by way of greeting. "I'm not thinner. I've been outside more. Those are not mutually exclusive." Clara surveyed the entrance hall. The house looks better than I expected. I've been working on it. The grounds look worse. The south field. I don't want to hear about the south field yet. Show me to my room, give me an hour, then dinner, and you can tell me everything, including whatever it is you're not telling me in your letters. Imogen had been telling Clara everything in her letters for 15 years. Detailed, candid, comprehensive letters. The letters of the past 6 weeks had not mentioned Lawrence Trevelyan once. Clara noticed this over the soup. The road negotiation. You mentioned it in September, nothing since. Either it collapsed or it's ongoing, and either way you don't want to discuss it. It's ongoing. And? Proceeding. Imogen. Imogen cut her bread with more precision than bread requires. The Duke has been cooperative. Clara put her spoon down and looked at Imogen, with the expression of a woman who can read 20 years of evasions like a second language. Cooperative, she said. Yes. What does he look like? Clara. Factual question. Imogen set her knife down. He has tall brown hair, he has green eyes. A pause. He is not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would make it more difficult. And instead? Imogen was quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the Ferris oaks. He listens, she said. He disagrees sometimes, but he listens first, and he doesn't. She stopped. Doesn't what? He doesn't make me feel as though I am performing competence for his benefit. Most men watch me present the figures, as if waiting for the mistake. He looks at the figures. Clara was quiet for a moment. Imogen, she said gently. I know, Imogen said. Do you? Yes. She picked up her wine. It's nothing, it's a business arrangement. He was rude to me at the partridge dinner, and I intend to get my easement, and I would like very much to change the subject. Clara changed the subject. She did so with the grace of someone who had no intention of letting it go. Clara met him on the Saturday at the Albright card party. Lawrence was there not because he particularly wanted to be, but because his presence was wanted, and he had not yet found a reason to outweigh 29 years of accumulated expectation. He saw Imogen first. She saw him see her, which meant she saw the slight adjustment in his expression. Not a smile exactly, but the removal of the blankness he wore when nothing interested him. Clara at Imogen's elbow saw all of it. The Duke of Trevelyan, Imogen said. Your Grace, my friend Mrs. Clara Blythe. Mrs. Blythe, he bowed. Are you visiting long? A fortnight, perhaps longer. I find I have reasons to stay. She smiled with the brilliant transparency of a woman being entirely opaque. Lady Imogen tells me the negotiations are progressing well. I hope so. He glanced at Imogen. We're very close, I think. On the maintenance clause, Imogen said. On everything. A small silence. Clara looked between them with the focused attention of someone watching a very good play. How delightful, she said, to no one in particular. They played cards. Lawrence was at a different table. Twice Imogen looked up and found him already looking, and both times he did not look away first, which she found. She did not know what she found it. She filed it somewhere she had not labelled and returned to her cards. Walking home, Clara said nothing for a full 5 minutes. Go on, Imogen said. I was thinking, Clara said, that green is a very nice colour for eyes. Clara. And that he looked at you as though he were working something out. He's working out the drainage clause. Imogen, my darling, no. Imogen did not answer. The frost was hard on the road and she needed to watch her step, and that was a perfectly sufficient reason to say nothing further. It was a Tuesday, the second week of December. The Trevelyan drawing-room fire had been going since morning and had achieved the particular warmth that makes a cold outside feel like a different country. The footman stood near the hall door, which was open, as it always was during their meetings, a small, necessary formality that neither of them discussed. The draft easement lay on the table. It was close to final. 2, perhaps 3 sessions remained. Imogen had been thinking about that, about what done meant. She had been careful not to think about it too precisely. I want to revisit the perpetuity clause, she said. We agreed on perpetuity. We agreed in principle. I want the language tighter. If the estate changes hands, the easement runs with the land, not the title. That's standard. He leaned forward, found the page. 3rd paragraph. She read it. He was right. She had written half of it herself. Fine, she said. He looked at her. She was doing something with her pen that she did when she was not satisfied with her own answer. What is it? He said. Nothing, the clause is fine. A silence. The fire settled. Rain tapped at the windows. Imogen, he said. It was the first time he had used only her name. She did not think he had noticed. She looked up. I've been thinking, he said, about a simpler solution. She waited. I could simply give you the road. He put the document down. Not the easement, not on terms. A formal conveyance of the lane into the Ferris estate, while your father holds the title. It would be his, legally, and therefore yours to manage. The conveyancing is straightforward. The strip has no agricultural value to me. He said it simply. You would not need to negotiate for something that should already be yours. She set her pen down. He had expected relief, some loosening of what she carried. What he saw instead was someone going very quiet in the way of a person deciding exactly what to say. No, she said. He waited. Thank you, she said. No. Imogen, you are being generous. She said it without warmth. I know that, but I need you to understand what you are actually offering. He said nothing. He was listening. He always actually listened. You are offering to give my father a piece of land, she said, because the alternative is negotiating with me as an equal party to a legal agreement, and the first is simpler and resolves the inconvenience of the whole business, and I would manage that lane, you are right. And next winter, when the North Track floods, I would stand on that lane knowing it is there because Lawrence Trevelyan gave it to us. She paused. Because he felt, she chose the word carefully, charitable. That is not, isn't it? He stopped. An estate run on a duke's goodwill is not an estate, she said. It is a dependency with a nicer name. My father has been dependent on goodwill his entire life, the goodwill of his creditors, his tenants, men who have been patient because they liked him and found it less trouble to be owed than to collect. The estate is what remains of the shape of something, and I have been in that ledger for 2 years. Every line of it. I will not trade the dignity of a legal right for the comfort of a gift, not from you, not from anyone. The fire moved. Outside, the rain had resolved into something more serious. Lawrence sat very still. She picked up her pen, set it down, looked at the document. I want the easement, she said, on the terms we've been negotiating, completed by the end of January. I would like to continue on that basis. His voice when he spoke was different, quieter. All right, he said. She nodded, gathered the papers. Her hands were steady. He watched them be steady and understood quite suddenly what steadiness like that cost. Same time Thursday? She said. Yes, he said. She left. He heard her voice in the hall, a word to the footman, her coat requested, the outer door, then nothing. He sat in the room for a long time. The fire burned down. He did not ring to have it rebuilt. He thought about 2 years, every line of it. He thought about the evening at Mrs. Partridge's dinner, and the sound of his own laugh and what it had looked like from 6 feet away. The fire eventually demanded attention. He rang for it. He picked up the easement draft and read it from the beginning. When he reached the maintenance clause, the shared proportional arrangement she had pushed for, he sat with it. It was a better clause than his original offer. Fairer, it would last. He set the document down and looked at the chair where she had been sitting. Outside, the December rain argued against the windows, and the evening settled over the Trevelyan estate, and Lawrence Trevelyan, who had everything and had found none of it interesting, sat in his drawing room and discovered that one particular Thursday had become, without his permission, the thing he organized his week around. He found, somewhat to his surprise, that he did not find this interesting. He found it alarming, which meant, he thought, it was probably something else entirely. The Thursday after her refusal, Imogen arrived to find that Lawrence had rearranged the table. It was a small thing. The chairs had always been across from each other, the geometry of negotiation, 2 sides, a document between them. Now the chairs were at the corner, adjacent, the document still between them, the distance halved. He did not mention it. She did not mention it. She sat down, opened the satchel, and they began. He had redrafted the seasonal wait clause overnight. She could see it was overnight work. The handwriting slightly less considered than usual, the kind produced when the thought outruns the hand. He had gotten it right. He had gotten it exactly right, in a way that closed the last argument she had been holding in reserve, and she sat with that a moment before she said so. This works, she said. Good. You changed the threshold. The original was too low for a loaded grain cart. I looked up the weight specifications. She looked at him. He was reading his own copy, annotating the margin. "When?" she said. "Yesterday evening." She looked back at the document. Outside, December light arrived late and achieved little. "Thank you," she said. He glanced up. The green eyes held hers for a moment. "It needed doing," he said, and returned to the page. They worked for 2 hours. The agreement was nearly final. She could see the shape of it now, complete, the way you see the end of a long road when weather clears. 3 clauses remained genuinely open. 2 were technical. 1 was not. The one that was not was the question of notice period. How much warning she must give before using the lane during his shooting season. "A week," he said. 3 days. "My guests have travel arrangements. A week is reasonable." 3 days is reasonable. A week presupposes I know my harvest schedule in advance, which presupposes weather that does not exist in England. 5 days. 4. He looked at her. She looked back. His mouth moved, not quite a smile, something more private. 4 days, he said. Done. She wrote it in. He watched her write it in. "That's the last of the substantive points," she said. "Yes." She turned the pages. He turned his. They went through them together, clause by clause, without speaking, just the sound of pages, the fire, the rain. When they reached the end, she set the document down. "My father's solicitor will need to review the final draft," she said. "As will mine. The end of January is still achievable." "Yes." She began to close the satchel, then stopped. "This will be good for the estate when it's done." "I know," he said. She fastened the buckle. "I was not certain in September that you would take it seriously." "No," he said. "I don't imagine you were." She stood. He stood. They had fallen into this habit. He always waited until she had gathered her things. "Same time next week," she said. "Actually," he paused, "there is a matter I need to see to on the estate Friday morning. The Fortescue tenancy near the eastern boundary. The drainage on that side has been giving problems. A beat. It borders your land, as it happens, the northeast corner." She looked at him. "If you wanted to come," he said, with the careful casualness of someone who has rehearsed the tone, "your drainage work on the east edge might be relevant. Petch's new cut." "Petch's cut is working," she said. "I know, but it may be affecting our side of the boundary." She considered this. It was plausible, entirely plausible, and also possibly untrue. "What time Friday?" she said. 8. "I'll be there," she said. Friday was clear and brutally cold, the kind that arrives in December with the conviction of something that means to stay until March. The ground was iron. Their breath came in clouds. They rode the eastern boundary together with a Trevelyan groom behind them at the proper distance, present, visible, doing his job without making a performance of it. Lawrence pointed out the Fortescue drainage problem, which was real. She looked at Petch's cut from the Trevelyan side and confirmed that it was not, in fact, causing the issue, which Lawrence had probably already known. They rode for 2 hours. They talked about drainage for perhaps 20 minutes. The rest of the time they talked about, she would think about this later, everything else. His grandmother, who had died 3 years ago and who had apparently been the only person in his life to tell him things he did not want to hear, which he had valued in retrospect more than at the time. Her mother, who had died when Imogen was 16 and whose handwriting occupied the first third of the ledger before Imogen's own took over. The Ferris Oaks, the particular quality of Trevelyan land in winter, harder, more open, less sheltered. She did not realize until they turned back that she had told him about her mother. She did not tell people about her mother. She filed this carefully and did not examine it. At the Trevelyan stables he helped her dismount. His hands were at her waist for less than a moment. She was aware of them considerably longer. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Right, it was useful." He looked at her with the expression she had been cataloguing without meaning to, the one that was not indifference, had not been indifference for some time, and had become something she was not prepared to name. "Come back Thursday," he said. "I always come back Thursday," she said. He smiled. A real one. Not the social version, not the faintly amused one from the early meetings. This one reached the green eyes and stayed there. She rode home. She told herself nothing in particular firmly for the entire journey. Clara was in the hall when she arrived. "And you've been gone 4 hours," Clara said. "I was at Trevelyan." "I know, Petch told me." Clara looked at her with the focused attention that Imogen had been the subject of since she was 8 years old. Your color is very high. I've been riding in December. Imogen. Clara, come and sit down. They sat. Clara poured tea with the deliberate patience of a woman who had decided what she was going to say and was letting the silence do preliminary work. He asked you to come back, Clara said. We have a meeting Thursday. We always have a meeting Thursday. Petch said the Duke has ridden past the South Field 4 times this week. The South Field borders Trevelyan land. Imogen, Clara set her cup down. I have known you for 20 years. I watched you manage this house at 16 when your mother died. I watched you take over the estate accounts at 22 when your father retreated into ancient Greece. I have watched you be competent and careful and fiercely self-sufficient through everything. And I am telling you, as someone who loves you, you are allowed to want something for yourself. Imogen did not speak. He looks at you, Clara said, as though he is working out how he failed to see you before. He laughed at me, Imogen said, at Mrs. Partridge's dinner. I know. He said, let her try to a room full of people, and I was standing. I know, and he was wrong, and he knows he was wrong. Clara looked at her steadily. People can be wrong and then be different. Imogen was quiet for a long time. The fire ticked. From the back of the house came the muffled sounds of the kitchen at work. He's not different, she said. He is who he was. He just looks at the problem, the actual problem. And he doesn't... She stopped. Doesn't what? He doesn't make me feel as though I am a problem to be solved, or a responsibility or a curiosity. A pause. He makes me feel as though I am a person he is interested in knowing. Clara was very quiet. Which changes nothing, Imogen said. The easement is nearly final. Another few weeks and the business between us is concluded. He is a duke. I am the daughter of an earl who cannot keep his estate solvent. These are facts. They are facts, Clara agreed. They are not conclusions. Imogen looked at her. I'm going to bed, Clara said, standing. Think about what I said. She paused at the door. He has very remarkable eyes. Go to bed, Clara. Clara went to bed. Imogen sat by the fire for another hour, not thinking about anything in particular, with great discipline and very limited success. The storm arrived on a Wednesday. It came from the northwest in the late afternoon. Imogen could see the darkness building over the Trevelyan Ridge from the Ferris upper windows. By 5 o'clock, it had reached both estates simultaneously, and by 6, it had declared its intention to stay the night. The north track flooded within the hour. She had expected that. What she had not expected was Wren's Cut itself, the lane, the subject of 6 weeks of careful negotiation, to take on water at the southern end, where it dipped below field level, and for that water to begin moving toward the Ferris lower barn. Petch found her in the hall at 6:30, already pulling on her coat. I've sent the Hale boy to Trevelyan Park, he said without preamble. She looked at him. Water's coming off both sides of the cut, he said. The Duke's land will be running the same way, he should know. A pause, brief and unrevealing. I'll stay at the top of the lane and direct the men. You take Farrow and Grice to the barn end. How long do we have? An hour, maybe less. Go, she said. She rode out with Farrow and Grice into the dark and the horizontal rain, lanterns that the wind did its best to eliminate, and the particular clarity of mind that comes when there is only one problem, and it is in front of you. The water was moving fast. Not catastrophically, not yet. The lower barn held the winter feed. If the water reached it, they would lose the lot. They built a temporary berm across the lane mouth, turf and stone and timber, working by lantern light. Imogen was at the berm herself, lifting stone, because there were 3 of them, and the water was not inclined to wait. It was Farrow who spotted the lanterns on the Trevelyan side. 3 of them, coming down through the gate at the top of Wren's Cut. A man on horseback in front, 2 Trevelyan men behind him with timber cut and ready. Lawrence dismounted in the water without ceremony, looked at the berm, the barn, the water level, looked at Imogen, who was standing in 6 inches of moving water with a length of timber, soaked to the skin. The lane is lower on your side than the survey showed, he said. My fault, I should have caught it. You're here now, she said. He rolled up his sleeves in the rain and took the timber from her hands, and between the 5 of them, the berm was solid within the hour. The water found the field edge, moved away from the barn, and by 8 o'clock the immediate crisis was over. Farrow and Grice went back with the Trevelyan men. Petch descended from the top of the lane and assessed the berm with the expression of a man who would have done it differently and was prepared to acknowledge it had worked. Lawrence's horse stood patiently at the gate. Petch looked at the Duke, looked at Imogen, said, "I'll see to the horses, my lady," and went with the unhurried purpose of a man who had somewhere to be. They were alone at the berm, lantern light. The rain thinning now, resolving into ordinary persistence. Imogen was shaking, not from fear, from cold and from the tremor of sustained effort when it stops being necessary. Her coat was soaked through. She could not feel her feet. "Come inside," Lawrence said. "Let Mrs. Winton get you dry." "I'm all right." "You are shaking." "I'm cold." "Lady Imogen." He said it with a steadiness that cut through the argument before it could form. "Come inside. Mrs. Blythe is at Ferris Hall. I can have my groom ride ahead and tell her you're coming. 20 minutes by the fire, dry clothes if Mrs. Doyle can find something, and then I'll ride back with you myself. You should not ride alone in this." She looked at him. He was as wet as she was, his coat ruined, and he had spent 2 hours in the dark and the water, and had not once suggested it was anything other than a shared problem. 20 minutes, she said. The Trevelyan housekeeper, Mrs. Doyle, produced dry clothes with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had managed crises for 30 years and found this one entirely manageable. Imogen was installed before the kitchen fire, the kitchen, not the library, which was Mrs. Doyle's sensible choice and which Imogen was grateful for, with tea and Mrs. Doyle herself nearby, making a thorough business of hanging the wet coat to dry. Lawrence came in 10 minutes later, changed and sat across the kitchen table with the straightforward ease of a man who had no interest in the room's social hierarchy. Mrs. Doyle remained occupied at the other end of the kitchen. She was a discreet woman. She was not an absent one. "The lane will need resurfacing," he said. "I know. The survey missed the gradient. I'll have it redone in spring. The maintenance clause covers the resurfacing cost proportionally, I know, but the survey error is mine." He looked at her steadily. "I'll bear that cost separately." She would have argued it normally. She let it go. "Why did you come out tonight?" she said. "The storm." Petch sent the hail boy. Said the water was running off both sides. He looked at his hands, wrapped around his own cup. "It borders my land. It was a reasonable thing to do. You brought timber already cut. I thought it might be needed." She looked at him. He looked back. "Imogen," he said. Mrs. Doyle moved something at the far end of the kitchen. He did not lower his voice, but he spoke with the care of someone who knew what they were saying and had decided to say it anyway. "I have been trying to work out when it changed." She did not ask what it was. "I think it was the letter," he said. "The first one. The morning after the partridge dinner." He looked at the fire. "I sat there reading it thinking, she came home from that room and sat down and wrote the most professional letter I have ever received, and didn't put a single word in it about what I'd done." He paused. "That was when I knew you were formidable, and that I had been an idiot." "You were," she said. "Yes. You laughed at me in front of people who then had to watch me pretend I hadn't heard it." "I know." Quiet. "I knew it by the next morning. I knew it the moment I read your letter and could not find a single word in it that was anything but correct." He looked at her. "You gave me no room to feel forgiven, and that was exactly right. I have not forgiven myself for it." "You didn't know me," she said. "You had no reason to take it seriously." "I had every reason." He stopped, tried differently. "Do you know what I think about every Thursday since October?" She did not speak. "Whether you'll come back," he said. "Whether I'll find another reason to extend the meeting, whether—" He looked at his hands, then back at her. "I have ridden past your south field 4 times this week." "I know," she said. "Petch told Clara." A silence. Then quietly, he laughed. A real laugh, short and rueful with no distance in it, and she laughed too, which surprised her, and the laughter ran out and left something quieter in its place. "Imogen," he said, "just her name." "Don't," she said. "Why?" "Because I do not know what to do with it. I have the easement to finish and the estate—" "I know. And you are a duke, and I am the daughter of a man who cannot—" "None of that," he said, "is the reason." She looked at him. "The reason," he said, "is that you don't trust it. You don't trust that it's real and not charity, not pity, not something that looks like feeling and is actually condescension with better manners." The accuracy of it stopped her entirely. "Is that it?" he said. She looked at the fire, at her hands which were steady because she had taught them to be steady a long time ago. "Yes," she said. He leaned across the kitchen table and kissed her. It was not tentative. It was not asking a question. It was the end of a conversation that had been running since October, that had lived in every clause argued, and every meeting that ran longer than it needed to, and it was, above everything else, entirely honest. She kissed him back. Mrs. Doyle, at the far end of the kitchen, became very interested in a pot that required her complete and sustained attention. Neither of them said anything for a long time, which was, after so many months of so many careful words, exactly sufficient. His groom rode ahead to Ferris Hall. Lawrence rode back with Imogen himself, the two of them on the road in the last of the rain, the groom behind at a proper distance, the lantern throwing enough light to see the lane ahead. At the Ferris gate she dismounted. He did not. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday," she said. She walked up to the house. Clara was in the hall, wrapped in a shawl, with the expression of a woman who had received a preparatory message from a groom and had been forming conclusions ever since. "You're soaked," Clara said. "I was at Trevelyan." "I know." Clara looked at her face. "And?" Imogen took off her borrowed coat, Mrs. Doyle's second best, which she would need to return. She hung it by the door. "And," she said, "I'm going to bed." "Imogen." "Good night, Clara." She went upstairs. She did not sleep for a long time, which was, she found, not entirely unpleasant. On Thursday she came to the meeting, and they finalized the remaining language of the easement and spoke about nothing that had happened on Wednesday night. She was warm. She was correct. She asked about the lane survey. She agreed on the final phrasing of the indemnity clause. She accepted coffee. She did not look at him differently than she had before, or rather, she looked at him carefully in exactly the way she had before, which was itself the difference. He let her do it, he did not push. She rode home and opened the ledger, and worked through the winter accounts until midnight, and the numbers were what they always were, which was not enough, and she wrote the column totals in her mother's handwriting style, because she always did when she was tired, and did not notice until she closed the book. The easement went to solicitors the following week, out of their hands. All that remained was the wait. And with the document gone, the Thursday meetings had no pretext. He wrote a note, not a letter. He said he would be riding the eastern boundary Saturday, and would she care to join him. She wrote back that she had a matter to attend to Saturday, but Sunday might be possible. He replied that Sunday suited perfectly. They rode Sunday. They rode the week after. They walked the Ferris South Field in January frost while Petch explained the spring planting rotation with the patient thoroughness of a man who had not been asked and was going to tell them regardless, and Imogen caught Lawrence's eye over Petch's head and found his mouth doing the thing that was not quite a smile, and she looked away before she could do anything about the way her chest felt. In the evenings she opened the ledger. The numbers were the same. She thought about what Clara had said. People can be wrong and then be different. She thought about Wednesday night, the kitchen fire, the kiss, the accuracy of what he had said. She thought about the partridge dinner. Let her try. The laugh. The room. She thought about what it would mean to trust it, to believe that what she had seen in his face in the Trevelyan kitchen was what it appeared to be, and not some more refined version of condescension. The Duke who had tired of being bored and found something new to be interested in, and would find it less interesting once the novelty concluded. She had been wrong about people before. She had not, since her mother died, let herself be wrong about something she could not afford. The estate was the estate. The ledger was what it was. These were facts she could hold. Lawrence Trevelyan's green eyes in firelight was not a fact she knew how to hold at all. The solicitous Mr. Davenport came in January with a gift of stored apples from Harrow Farm and the look of a man who has decided to stop being patient. He was kind. Imogen had always known he was kind. It was the problem with him, in a way, the completeness of his reasonableness. He was not the wrong sort of man. He was simply the wrong man. He sat in the Ferris drawing-room and talked about the spring planting and asked after her father, and was throughout so thoroughly everything that was sensible and safe and possible that Imogen found herself noting it the way you note the temperature, accurately, without feeling it. Her father was not in the room. Her father was rarely in the room. But Mrs. Hart, the housekeeper, moved through on some domestic pretext and settled near the window with her mending, which was the established arrangement for receiving male callers when the Earl was unavailable, and which everyone understood without discussing it. "Lady Imogen," Davenport said at last, "I think you know why I've called." "Mr. Davenport, I don't intend to be dramatic. You're practical, I'm practical. He looked at her steadily. "I have admired you for 2 years. I think we would suit, and I think you need someone who is here, who intends to be here." She looked at him. He meant it. He meant every word of it. "I am sensible of the honor," she said. "That's not a yes." "No," she said, "it isn't." He accepted it with the grace of a man who had prepared for the possibility. "Is there someone else?" She thought about lying. "I don't know," she said, which was the most honest she could be. He nodded, stood, shook her hand with warmth that she thought well of him for, and left. She sat for a long time. She did not know. That was the truth of it. She did not know if what was between her and Lawrence was something real and worth the terror of trusting it, or whether she was simply responding to proximity and attention and green eyes and the way he looked at the figures. She picked up the ledger, looked at the first page, her mother's writing, clear and confident from 15 years ago, when the estate had been solvent and the world a different shape. She turned to the current page, her own writing, the numbers. She closed it. She did not write to Trevelyan that week. She sent a note saying she had estate business. He replied that he hoped all was well. She replied that it was. She did not suggest another time. He waited. She had known he would. It was one of the things she had learned about him, that he did not push when pushing would break something. He waited. He wrote occasionally, brief notes about the Lane survey progress or the solicitor's timeline. She replied in kind. The correspondence was perfectly civil. It was, she recognized, the correspondence of two people who had agreed, without discussing it, to hold very still. She missed the meetings. She missed the annotated draft on the table and the argument about drainage and the coffee going cold while they worked through a clause. She said this once, quietly, to the ledger, which did not respond, the way he listened. Clara had returned to London in January. She wrote letters. One said, "You are doing the thing you do, which is deciding that wanting something is the same as being made vulnerable by it, and treating your own happiness as a liability. Stop it." The next said, "Have you stopped it yet?" The one after said only, "Imogen." She did not stop it. She was very busy with the estate. The spring planting needed planning. The Trevelyan surveyor came in February and did the full assessment of the lane. The results were sent per the easement's maintenance clause. She received her copy. She wrote a brief note of acknowledgement to Lawrence. She did not elaborate. He replied with 3 lines. The third said, "I hope you are well. I find that I continue to think about Thursday mornings, and I am not certain what to do with that." She read it 4 times, filed it with the easement documents, did not reply to the 3rd line. The easement was executed in the 2nd week of February. Her father's solicitor sent word. The lane was the Ferris estate's by legal right, in perpetuity, the Earl's to hold and Imogen's to manage. The maintenance terms were exactly as she had negotiated. Lawrence had borne the survey cost separately, as he had said he would. She held the executed document for a while. This was what she had wanted, what she had stood 6 feet from a laughing duke to eventually, patiently, legally secure. The estate had the road, the harvest could move, the lower barn was safe. She put the document in the ledger on the current page, beside the winter accounts. Evidence. She sat at her desk for a long time. The lane was secured. The business between them was concluded. He had said he would not push, and he had not, and she had made herself very busy and entirely safe. And she was sitting at her desk in February with the thing she had spent 6 months working for, and the ledger was closed and the house was quiet, and what she felt was not satisfaction. She opened the ledger to the first page, her mother's writing. Her mother had died at 41, 16 years married, most of it good, some of it very good, and she had never once suggested to Imogen that caution was a virtue in matters of the heart. She had simply been present, in the house, in the accounts, in the oaks on the south lawn, until she wasn't. Imogen closed the ledger. She looked out the window at the Ferris South field, at the oaks, at the ridge beyond where the Trevelyan land began. She was going to be sensible about this until March. She lasted 11 days. He came on a Thursday. Not at 10 o'clock, not with an appointment. At 2:30 in the afternoon, which was not their time and was not announced, and which meant she was in the south field with Petch when the Trevelyan groom arrived at the hall with a note saying the Duke had called and was waiting in the drive. She walked back from the field. She had mud on her boots and her working coat, and her hair was less arranged than it had been that morning. She had no time to do anything about any of this, and found, when she thought about it for 2 steps, that she did not particularly want to. He was in the drive, not on horseback. He had come in the curricle, which meant he had not come to ride the boundary. He was standing beside it, looking at the Ferris oaks, with the expression she had first properly seen in November. Not boredom, not the social blankness. A man looking at something and thinking about it. He heard her on the gravel and turned. She stopped 6 feet away. He looked at her, the coat, the boots, the hair, without any indication that he minded any of it. "I have something for you," he said. From his coat he produced a document. She recognized the format, legal, formal, several pages. He held it out. She took it, read the first page. It was a deed. The lane, Wren's Cut, the full length of it from the Ferris boundary to the Dunstable Road, formally settled in perpetuity into the Ferris estate's entail, with a covenant that prohibited its separation from the estate, regardless of any future change of title or debt arrangement. It had been executed with her father's solicitor and witnessed. The Earl of Ferris had signed it, which meant Imogen had put it in front of him and he had signed it, which meant Lawrence had gone to her father directly. She looked up. "I know what you said in December," he said immediately. "I know why you said it, and I have not forgotten a word of it." He said it carefully, in the way she had learned. He said things he had thought about at length. "The easement is already executed. You have your legal right. This is different." She looked at the document, at his face. "The lane in the entail cannot be sold, mortgaged, or separated from the Ferris estate by any future earl, any creditor, or any arrangement made without both families' consent." He paused. "It is not mine to give you. It cannot legally be yours personally. We both know that. But it can be the estate's, bound so tightly into the Ferris line that nothing can pull it out. Your sons will have it. Your father cannot lose it. No one who comes after can take it." He met her eyes steadily. "That is not charity. That is me making sure there is nothing between your estate and its road that I could ever close. Not now. Not in 20 years. Not ever." She was very still. "There is something else," he said. She waited. "I have been trying to work out how to say this since February, and I cannot find a version that is not simply the truth, so—" He looked at her directly. "I am in love with you. I have been in love with you since at least October, and possibly since September, when you told me you found the autumn wet, and I thought, without meaning to, that you were the most honest person I had met in years." He did not look away. "I am not offering rescue. I'm not offering a comfortable arrangement or a reasonable solution to the estate's problems. I'm asking, and I have never asked for anything before in my life, which you may take as either recommendation or warning. I'm asking whether you would consider doing me the considerable honor of marrying me." The Ferris oaks were perfectly still. The February air was cold and clear and entirely itself. She looked at the deed in her hands, then at him. "You went to my father," she said. "Yes." "Without telling me?" "Yes." "How did he receive it?" A brief pause. "He asked me whether I intended to interfere with the Peloponnesian Wars. I said I did not." He seemed satisfied. She looked at him for a long moment, at the green eyes which were looking back with the expression she had spent months filing under insufficient categories. Not indifference, not charity, not condescension with better manners. Simply him, Lawrence Trevelyan, who had been an idiot at a dinner party in October and had spent every week since being something else. "I refused, Mr. Davenport," she said. Something moved in his face. "I didn't know that." "In January. I told him I didn't know if there was someone else." She looked down at the deed. "I have spent 6 weeks being extremely sensible about whether there is." "And," he said. She looked up. "And I am very tired of being sensible about it." He crossed the 6 feet between them and kissed her, and this time it was different from the Trevelyan kitchen. That had been the end of an argument. This was the beginning of something else, and she knew it, and she kissed him back with the full force of everything she had been carefully filing since October. When they stopped, she was still holding the deed. "Yes," she said, "obviously yes." He went very still, then laughed, short and entirely undignified, and she laughed too, and his hand came up to her face briefly with a gentleness so unguarded that she filed it nowhere at all, just let it be what it was. Petch appeared at the corner of the house, registered the scene with the thoroughness of a man who required complete information, and withdrew without a word. They married in April. The church was the one where she had sat 3 rows behind him in September and found the sermon wanting. The vicar said something appropriate about union and permanence. Clara wept, having promised she would not, with the serenity of someone who had never intended to keep that promise. Her father attended, which required some management of his schedule, but he stood in the first pew with the mild benevolence of a man who had signed a great many documents this year and found them all to have been, on reflection, excellent decisions. Lawrence put the ring on Imogen's hand and looked at her in the particular way that made Clara produce a second handkerchief. The ledger received its new first page that evening. Imogen's hand, the date, the new names. The entailed deed was folded into the back cover where the old survey documents had always lived. The easement sat beside it. The lane appeared in neither document as a gift. It appeared as what it was, the estate's own, bound and permanent, belonging to no one's generosity. Their first son arrived the following February. They named him William, a solid name, Imogen said, for a solid fact. He had his father's green eyes and his mother's expression when she was thinking, which meant he looked, from the age of 4 months, like a person with opinions he was preparing to voice. Lawrence held him in the Trevelyan library, which had become incrementally partly hers, her own books shelved alongside his without formal arrangement, and looked at him with the expression he had once reserved for things he could not stop thinking about. "He'll have Trevelyan," he said. "Yes," Imogen said. She was in the chair she had first sat in during the negotiations, which still felt faintly like hers. "We should think about Ferris. We have time. We should think about it now." She raised an eyebrow. "William is 3 weeks old." "I'm a planner," he said. "You are many things. A planner is not historically among them." He smiled, the real one. "I've been improving." "Ah, you have," she said, simply, without armor. The second son came 18 months later, in late summer. They named him James. He had his mother's brown eyes and his father's capacity for stillness, and the combination meant he could occupy a room for 20 minutes undetected, at which point he would say something that rearranged the entire conversation. He would inherit Ferris. This had been decided before his birth, between Imogen and Lawrence in the Ferris study, with the ledger open on the desk between them. Lawrence had picked the ledger up when they sat down. He did this sometimes. Not to read it, just to hold it the way you handle something that has mattered to someone you love. He always set it down and let her open it. This time she left it in his hands. "You read it," she said. He looked at her. "The numbers are better than they were," she said. "Not what they should be yet, but better. I'd like you to see what we're actually working with." He opened it, read from the current page backward, her handwriting year by year, the slow turning of figures, from desperate to manageable to something that, on a good page, approached solvent. He read back further, to the page where her mother's writing gave way to hers. He read it slowly, without rushing. When he finished, he closed the book and held it a moment, both hands. Then he set it on the desk between them. "James will have this too," he said. "Not just the land, this." "Yes," she said, "if we do it right." "We'll do it right," he said. She looked at him across the ledger. He looked back. The Ferris study was warm. Outside, late August had settled into golden indolence, the oaks heavy with it, the ridge visible where the Trevelyan land began or the Ferris land ended, depending on which side you were standing on. Imogen put her hand on the ledger. "When I wrote that first letter," she said, "in October, the morning after the partridge dinner." "Yes," he said. "I was not certain you would agree to the meeting. I thought you might send it to your secretary, reply with 3 lines and a joke." "I nearly did," he said. "What stopped you?" He thought about it. "It was a very good letter," he said, "and I had, reading it, a feeling that I had done something I needed to put right." He looked at her. "I didn't know it was the beginning of anything. I just thought I should take it seriously." She looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled, the full one, the unarmored one, the one Clara had been waiting to see since October, and had, in the end, seen first. "Good," she said. Outside, the afternoon held everything. The oaks and the ridge and the lane that was now, in law and every other way that mattered, simply the road between one place and another. The boundary ran where it had always run. Nobody much troubled themselves about where exactly that was. The ledger sat on the desk between them, closed with its new first page and its old numbers, and the entailed deed folded in the back. Lawrence reached across and took her hand. She let him.